The whole room heard it, every clink of silverware, every murmur of conversation, gone. Just his voice, cutting through the warm air of the Rideau room like something cold and wrong, and the sound of a woman trying very hard not to cry. You embarrass me every single time we go out. Every single time. This is the story of what happened the night Gerald Ashford thought he was the most powerful man in any room he walked into, and discovered, the very hard way, that he had never been more wrong about anything in his entire life. And if you've ever sat across from someone who made you feel small just for existing, stay with me, because this one's for you. Her name was Tessa Bowen, 26 years old. She'd moved to Ottawa from a small town outside of Sudbury 3 years ago with 2 suitcases, a community college diploma in hospitality management, and the kind of quiet stubbornness that doesn't announce itself but never actually goes away. She worked Tuesday through Sunday at La Maison Rideau, one of those restaurants where the bread costs $12 and the lighting is so low you're basically having dinner inside a secret. She was good at her job, patient, observant, the kind of server who remembered that the gentleman at table 9 always asked for his water without ice, and that the woman at table 4 was celebrating something she didn't want to name out loud, and that those two things, remembering details and keeping them to yourself, were basically the same skill. Gerald Ashford had been her boyfriend for 14 months. She had met him at a friend's birthday party. He was charming that night in the way that certain men are charming. Loudly, generously, with the confident ease of someone who had never once worried about being liked. He was 38, senior partner at an investment firm downtown. He wore suits like armor, and he had a laugh that made a whole table feel like they were in on something. Tessa had found that exciting once. The night it all fell apart was a Thursday in late November. Gerald had made the reservation himself, La Maison Rideau, his firm's table, 7:30 p.m., and Tessa had managed to swap shifts with a colleague so she could join him for the first time on the other side of the room. She'd worn the navy dress she'd bought on sale at Holt Renfrew and spent the afternoon doing her hair and telling herself this would be good, that they needed this. A normal evening, a reminder of why they worked. She should have trusted the feeling in her stomach when she walked in and saw the look on his face. Not happy to see her exactly, but satisfied. Like she'd arrived on time to serve a purpose. "You look fine," he said, barely glancing up from his phone. "Fine." She sat down. She smiled. She ordered the halibut and a glass of Riesling, and she told herself that fine was enough for tonight. It wasn't. It started around the soup course, the way these things always start. Small, almost reasonable. "You mentioned the restaurant to Karen today?" Gerald said, setting down his spoon. "I mentioned we were coming here, yeah. She asked what I was doing tonight. Karen from my office. We had coffee last week. We're friendly." Tessa kept her voice even. "She's not your friend, Tessa. She's my colleague. There's a difference. You don't need to be inserting yourself into my professional circle every time someone makes small talk with you. I didn't insert myself into anything. We had coffee." "You had coffee?" He repeated it like she'd said something slightly absurd. "Right." She looked down at her soup. She picked up her spoon. She reminded herself that she was 26 years old and had driven through a January whiteout on the 400 once without flinching, and she could certainly handle a dinner. But Gerald wasn't finished. By the time their entrees arrived, he'd moved from Karen to the way Tessa had pronounced Bordeaux, incorrectly, while talking to the sommelier, to the fact that she still hadn't updated her LinkedIn profile, despite him telling her twice to present herself better, to the general theme, the one he kept circling back to, the one she'd been trying not to hear clearly for months, that she wasn't quite matching the life he was building. "You're a waitress," he said, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. "And that's fine for now. But I'm at a stage where the people around me need to reflect a certain level of, I'm a hospitality professional," Tessa said quietly, "at one of the best restaurants in the city." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You take people's orders, sweetheart." She put down her fork. She didn't say anything. She was very aware, suddenly, of the tables around them. The couple to their left quietly eating duck. The group of 4 near the window sharing a bottle of Burgundy. The single man 2 tables over, eating alone, whose face she couldn't quite read from this angle, still composed, looking at his menu like it was the only thing in the room. "I think I'd like to go home," Tessa said. That was when Gerald's voice changed. Not loud, not yet, but something in it sharpened, went tight. "We're not done eating. I'm done eating, Tessa." He said her name like a warning. "Sit down." She hadn't stood up. She was still sitting. But she picked up her bag from the back of her chair and looped the strap over her shoulder, and that small motion, that quiet, controlled act of leaving before he was finished, was apparently the thing that broke something in Gerald Ashford's very carefully managed composure. "You think you can just walk out when you feel like it?" His voice had risen. Not a shout, not yet, but the table to their left had gone still. "You think this is—" He stopped, started again. "You know what your problem is? You have no idea what I've done for you. The introductions, the dinners, the places I've taken you that you never could have. Gerald, don't." He leaned across the table and his hand closed around her wrist. Not violently, but firmly, with the absolute certainty of a man who had never once been told no by anyone who mattered to him. "You're going to sit there and we are going to finish this meal like adults. Or so help me. You are going to regret the way this night ends. Do you understand me? I will make the rest of this very difficult for you." The Rideau room was silent. Not the quiet of an empty space. The louder quiet of 40 people deciding, very carefully, not to look. Tessa's heart was going at something like twice its usual speed. She could feel the warmth of embarrassment crawling up her throat. She looked at Gerald's hand on her wrist and she thought, very clearly, with a kind of cold calm that surprised her, "I am not going to cry in this restaurant." A voice came from behind Gerald's right shoulder. "I think she'd like to leave." It was quiet, conversational almost. The voice of someone making an observation rather than a threat. Gerald turned around. The man from 2 tables over was standing about 4 feet away. Up close he was, not large exactly, but present. The kind of presence that fills a room without trying to. He was somewhere in his early 40s, dark hair, a charcoal suit that had not come off any rack. His face was calm in a way that was not the calm of peace. It was the calm of someone who had made a great number of decisions and had stopped needing them to keep him up at night. His name was Rowan Callister, and if Gerald Ashford had done even the most basic research before choosing to eat at La Maison Rideau on a Thursday evening, if he had asked literally any of his colleagues at the investment firm, if he had paid the slightest attention to the kind of restaurant he was dining in, and who owned it, and who the building's primary investor was, and whose name appeared on approximately 40% of the real estate within a 6-block radius, he would have recognized that name. Gerald did not recognize it. "Excuse me," Gerald said. The charm was back, stiff, indignant. "This is a private conversation." "It stopped being private when the room went quiet," Rowan Callister said simply. "I don't know who you think you are, but my name is Rowan Callister." He said it the way you state a fact, the way you tell someone the temperature outside, or which highway they've taken a wrong turn on. The maitre d' had appeared at the edge of Tessa's vision, not moving forward, just there, watching. The sommelier had gone very still near the wine station. The couple to Tessa's left had stopped pretending to look at their food. Gerald hadn't gotten it yet. "Good for you," Gerald said. "I'm in the middle of Harlan." Rowan didn't raise his voice. He said the name the way you'd say "pass the salt." A man appeared from somewhere near the back of the restaurant, built like a question you didn't want answered, standing just behind Gerald's left shoulder. Gerald Ashford finally understood that something had shifted in the room. You could see the exact moment it happened, the way a certain certainty left his face, replaced by something he wasn't used to feeling and didn't have a name for. "I'm not looking for trouble," Gerald said. His voice had changed. "Neither am I," Rowan said, "so let go of her wrist." Gerald let go. Tessa pulled her arm back slowly. She stood up. Her legs were steadier than she expected. Rowan Callister looked at her, not a long look, not dramatic, just enough to ask a question without words. "You all right?" She nodded. She wasn't entirely sure it was true, but she nodded anyway. "I'll have someone bring your coat," the maitre d' said to her quietly. And it occurred to Tessa that this was not the first time he had done this, that this room had its own protocols for moments like this, and that she had somehow ended up on the protected side of them. Gerald was still standing there. His face had gone through several colors and had settled somewhere between embarrassed and furious, the expression of a man recalculating rapidly. This isn't. He stopped. Started. You have no idea what this is about. I know exactly what this is about, Rowan said. And so does everyone else in this room. He picked up his wine glass from his own table. He'd walked over here still holding it. Tessa realized the absolute unhurried ease of that, and looked at Gerald with an expression that was not unkind and somehow that made it worse. Enjoy the rest of your evening. It was a dismissal, clean and total, the kind that costs more than any insult. Gerald Ashford put on his jacket. He did not look at Tessa. He walked out of the Rideau room, and the sound of 40 people carefully not watching him leave was the loudest thing in the restaurant. Tessa stood there for a moment after the door closed. She was aware of the coat appearing at her elbow, held by a very professional young woman who looked at her with exactly the right amount of sympathy. Present but not intrusive. She slipped it on. She picked up her bag. "Thank you," she said, to no one in particular, and to everyone. "Mrs. Bowen." She turned. Rowan Callister was back at his table, his napkin in his lap, his posture as composed as if he'd merely stepped away to look at the dessert menu. He looked up at her. "You work here," he said. It wasn't quite a question. She was startled enough to answer honestly. Tuesday through Sunday. The smallest thing happened at the corner of his mouth, almost a smile. "Not quite." "I know," he said. "I've been coming here for 6 years. You remembered last winter that I don't take my coffee with sugar. Most people need to be told twice." He looked at her directly. "You should stay and finish your dinner. I'll make sure the kitchen keeps the halibut warm." She stared at him. "Sit wherever you'd like," he added, as if this were a perfectly ordinary offer on a perfectly ordinary night. Tessa Bowen, who had driven through a January whiteout on the 400 without flinching, and who had just had her wrist grabbed in public and had not cried, sat down at the table nearest the window and ate her halibut. It was, somehow, one of the best meals of her life. Rowan Callister ate his dinner. He did not look at her again. He read something on his phone. He tipped 40% and said goodnight to the maitre d' by name, and he was halfway to the door before he paused. "Mrs. Bowen," he said, without turning all the way around. "Yes? If he contacts you in a way that concerns you, leave a message with Harlan at the front desk. He'll be here tomorrow evening." She opened her mouth, closed it. "I don't," she started again. "Why would you do that?" He did turn then, just enough to look at her. "Because you remembered about the sugar," he said simply. "And because no one in this restaurant stepped in, including me, for about 45 seconds longer than I should have." Something moved across his face, not guilt exactly, but close to it. "I'm making up the difference." And then he was gone. She told her colleague Petra about it the next morning over coffee in the Glebe, and Petra, who had grown up in Ottawa and therefore knew exactly who Rowan Callister was and what his name meant in this city, went very still in a way that reminded Tessa of the sommelier. "Say that again," Petra said. Tessa said it again. Petra set down her mug. She looked at Tessa for a long moment with an expression that Tessa couldn't quite decode. "Tessa," she said carefully, "Rowan Callister has not eaten dinner alone in a restaurant in years. He has people for that. People who check rooms in advance, who sit at adjacent tables, who make sure nobody gets close enough to." She stopped. "He was alone last night?" "Just him and the one man. Harlan is not a colleague." Tessa was quiet for a moment. "I figured," she said. Petra wrapped both hands around her mug. "Gerald Ashford grabbed the wrist of a woman in front of Rowan Callister," she said slowly, as if testing the weight of each word. "And he's still walking around. He just told him to let go. Just told him." Petra exhaled. "Tessa, that's not how Rowan Callister handles things. That's not who he is or what he does when someone disrespects something he's decided to protect." Tessa thought about that for a moment. She thought about the absolute quiet of the room, about the maitre d' appearing without being called, about the 45 seconds, including me, for about 45 seconds longer than I should have, about the way Rowan Callister had said her name, Ms. Bowen, like it was something he'd always known. "He said he's been coming to the restaurant for 6 years, she said. Petra looked at her. "Yeah," she said. "I know." There was something in the way she said it. Not quite a warning, not quite the opposite. "What does that mean?" Tessa asked. Petra picked up her mug. She looked out the window at the November street, at the people in coats walking fast past the frost-edged glass. "It means," she said finally, "that you should leave a message for Harlan if you need to." She paused. "And also maybe if you don't." Gerald Ashford called once, 2 days later. She didn't answer. He sent a text that was 3 paragraphs long and used the word perspective 4 times. She left her phone on the kitchen counter and went to work. The restaurant was quiet on a Monday. She moved through the room the way she always did. Unhurried, present, noting the things that needed noting. The gentleman at table 9 asked for water without ice. She brought it before he finished asking. Near the back of the room, at the table by the window, a man in a charcoal suit sat with a single glass of something red and his phone face down on the white tablecloth. He didn't have a reservation under his name. He never did. The table was simply always ready. Tessa walked over. She set down the bread. She refilled his water without being asked. "Good evening, Mr. Callister," she said. He looked up. The not-quite smile was back. "Mrs. Bowen," he said, and somehow, in the way he said it, steady, certain, like something that had been decided quietly and without fanfare in a room she hadn't been in. She understood that the thing Petra hadn't quite said out loud was true. She was being protected now, not because she'd asked for it, not because she'd needed saving, but because she'd remembered about the sugar, and because she had not cried in his restaurant, and because Rowan Callister, who moved through this city like a current runs beneath water, present everywhere and visible nowhere, had apparently made a decision about Tessa Bowen on a Thursday evening in November. And when Rowan Callister made a decision, the city tended to arrange itself accordingly. She went back to the kitchen. She put in his usual order, the rack of lamb, medium rare, the roasted fingerlings instead of the potato gratin. She did not smile to herself, because she was a professional, but she thought, with that quiet stubbornness that had never once gone away, "All right then. So if you've ever been in a room where you felt small, where someone with a loud voice and an expensive suit made you feel like you were an inconvenience in your own life, I want you to know something. The room is always watching, and sometimes the quietest person in it is the one who changes everything." If this story hit you somewhere real, drop a comment below. Tell me what you thought of Gerald, and what you thought of what happened next. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Ella's Romance Library, because we're just getting started. And one last thing, do you think Tessa knew? In that moment when she said "all right then," did she know what she was walking into? Leave your answer below. I read every single one.